This is an I Am Listening original podcast.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, to decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on local and national political matters. Join us as we take a deep dive into local government across the county. Find out what the key decision makers have to say, what your money is being spent on, and how the party's policies could affect how we live. Plus, don't miss our regular feature, Westminster Watch, where we dissect the latest developments and decisions shaping the political landscape in the heart of the UK's capital. Engage with us as we delve into the issues that matter to you and explore the dynamic world of politics from a Kent perspective.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast in a week that we've all been waiting for, the announcement of the general election on July the 4th. And Kent is going to be one of the most scrutinised places in the country. So key is it that Keir Starmer launched day one at the Priestfield Stadium. I'm Simon Finlay, local democracy reporter covering Kent County Council, and I'm joined by Dan Essent, who covers the Borough and District Councils.
Hello.
And Robert Buddy, who reports on Medway Council.
Hello.
And we're also joined by KM Group Political Editor Paul Francis. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Simon.
And our special guest is the prospective parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party, Lauren Sullivan, who's hotly tipped to be elected as MP for Gravesham at the general election. Sir Keir Starmer was in Kent yesterday and launched day one of Labour's election campaign with a definite change theme.
I think what you're seeing in Medway and other places is the damage that 14 years of a Tory government have done. We've seen councils across the country, frankly, struggling financially because of the chaos of this government. And yes, we do want to change that. We want to ensure we've got a stable economy with strong fiscal rules so we don't have that sort of turbulence, because voters are worried about their public services. So I'm pleased that we may be on the cusp of being able to change the chaos and division that's caused so much difficulty under this government for so many councils.
You were there, Robert. What was his message?
Well, as you say, it was basically change. The whole point was about that under 14 years of Tory rule, things have all been going wrong. Chaos and division was used several times. And so that's basically, if you want change, vote for Labour is the slogan that Keir was going with. He was joined by Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader, and the Gillingham and Rainham candidate, which is the candidate where the Priestfield Stadium is. And it was all about change, and things can only get better. Yeah, yes,
or in Rishi's case, things can only get wetter. Paul, the language of politics during elections are always quite interesting. I mean, during the 97 campaign, or the lead up to it, the word new was used quite a lot, New Britain, New Labour and all that.
Yes, very important to parties to get some kind of phrase or word that encapsulates what they stand for and what they intend to do.
But change is so hackneyed and so overused, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and I do wonder, with overuse, people just turn off sometimes these. It's a bit like Rishi making his speech yesterday outside Downing Street, where he talked about a plan for this and a plan for that and a plan for a plan. It was a bit too much.
I'm talking with Rishi. Dan, how did he launch it then?
Yeah, so he called the general election itself after a day of pretty torturous speculation at about 5 yesterday afternoon outside Downing Street in the pouring rain, while protesters blasted the anthem of Blairism. Things can only get better over his speech. And then the official campaign launch was also this morning at the Excel Centre in London, and he was essentially repeating the same kind of points he was making at Downing Street. We're on the right track, don't want to risk it with the Labour Party who don't have a plan. Britain is going through some of the most dangerous times since the Second World War, and we need a firm hand on the tiller. That's essentially the Conservative campaign message, unlike, for example, in 2019, where the campaign was re-elect the Tories but you'll get change, whereas this time it's re-elect the Tories because we're on a good path and you don't want to turn back.
I gather a lot of the even the Kent Conservative MPs were quite taken by surprise by the early election.
Rishi Sunak kept saying it would be in the second half of the year, and I guess technically this is true. It's about 4 days into the second half of the year. But I think pretty much everyone was working under the assumption that it would be an autumn election. So I think a lot of MPs probably had to change their holiday plans and aren't too pleased about it.
What happens next in the sort of the time frame of a general election, just for listeners?
Although it might have seemed that the election campaign was launched this week, but they've got a bit of business in the House of Commons to dispense with before the campaigning begins in earnest. So next week, MPs will be spending time trying to pass through the legislative plans which remain on the books, which haven't gone through yet. And that, according to some people, might pose a threat to certain pieces of important legislation, including things like the Rishi Sunak's desire for a ban on smoking, rental and leaseholders reform in housing. Quite a bit of legislation which is potentially going to be lost.
Okay. What about sort of, the nuts and bolts of the campaign, manifestos and all the rest of it?
Well, you can imagine there's a bit of a rush to the printers from the parties about their campaign manifestos, given that no one was really seemed to expect this. I'm told that inside Labour, they have actually incorporated into their grid an earlier election, so it may be that they're on a better footing. I think what was interesting about the Kent MPs' response to the election was that not many of them were commenting, apart from Tracy Crouch, who said she didn't like the idea. You sort of tend to go through X, as it's known now, to gauge what political opinion is. And there was not very much at all from any of the Kent MPs.
Yeah, I think that might have been something to do with the fact that they felt, well, they didn't know anything about it. And secondly, they did feel as if they had the time to finish a bit of business off, but instead, they've got until basically today. But that's it, really.
So yeah, the MPs will be returning to their constituencies for 4 weeks to engage in earnest campaigns, knocking on doors and standing in high streets, dishing out leaflets and promising the earth.
Pressing the flesh and bit of grip and grin, or whatever they call it.
Yes, okay. Beware if you've got a baby with you.
Yes. Right, can we just turn to the Kent seats, because that's obviously what our main thing is. And if the polls are believed, once many kind of true blue Conservative constituencies are likely to go to the Labour Party, or even the Liberal Democrats. But so we've picked out some of the ones that we think are worthy of watching, and where the potential shocks might happen. Paul, you cast your eye over the ones down on the south coast.
Yeah, these coastal constituencies like Dover, which is obviously going to be of interest with the decision by Natalie Elphicke to defect to Labour. There's going to be a lot of interest on that. There's still quite a sizable majority that the Conservatives have in that seat, around about 12,000, I think it is. But they've got a very active and industrious candidate, Labour candidate, a guy called Mike Tapp, who's throwing a lot at the constituency.
He's been at that for years, though, hasn't he?
He's certainly been after a seat somewhere for some time.
Yeah.
And I think they feel that they can get this seat relatively comfortably, although that's not always the case with some of these marginal seats. It's a target seat for Labour. It was before Natalie Elphicke.
It's one of the 5, isn't it,
yeah,
that the Labour Party say that they have to take in Kent if they are to get a working majority. Obviously, the polls would suggest they're going to get more than 5. In fact, they're likely to get 13 of the 18 seats up for grabs.
And of course, in Dover, we have the ongoing issue of the small boats crossing, which was one of Rishi's cast iron commitments. He was going to stop the boats. He hasn't managed to stop the boats, so that feeds into the narrative of this being a seat which Labour is well placed to take. I mean, before the Conservatives won power in 2010. 2010.
I think it was that. Yeah, we've just turned to South Thanet. Is now kind of gone. Craig McKinley's seat. We saw him this week in the chamber and giving a very brave speech, for which he was given a thunderous round of applause from every side. But his seat kind of disappears into something that's morphed into Thanet East, and that's not good news for the Conservatives, is it?
Not the most helpful boundary review that I can think of for the Conservatives. Certainly, they lose some of their stronghold areas in the new makeup, and it's strange how a seat can go from being South Thanet to East Thanet. People might find that slightly confusing, but nevertheless, this was in its incarnation as South Thanet another Labour target, and I think the boundary changes have enhanced Labour's prospects for that seat.
One of the ones not on the target seat for the Labour Party, but they look as if they have a fairly reasonable chance of taking it, is Folkestone and Hyde. Now, that's Michael Howard's old seat, and he sat on for many years a majority of between 5,000 and 7,000. Now, you think that makes it technically a marginal, but it was a really solid 5,000 to 7,000, and he was quite comfortable there, and he always kind of knew that he could rely on that core vote. Damien Collins, who came in after Michael Howard stepped down from Parliament, has managed to increase that majority to, I think it's 20-odd thousand or something very similar. Yet he's predicted to lose. And what's caused that?
Well, I don't know what's caused that, but I think it's associated with the fact that this has traditionally been a three-way seat. You know, the vote split has gone three ways, and had Labour and the Lib Dems been a single party, they would have in the past have ousted the Conservatives. So I think it's the problem that the Lib Dems and Labour have in this particular seat is that they split the vote, and that allows the Conservatives to come through the middle.
Well, the Lib Dems always fancied it because they have been able to take control of the council, but what hasn't happened is that they haven't been able to translate that into parliamentary votes, and they don't have the numbers when it comes to the more tribal voting patterns at a general election when you've got a higher turnout as well. So that's basically one of the reasons why that's never actually fallen. But this time it looks vulnerable, and according to some of the polling, particularly electoral calculus, which has never really had it done as a loss to the Tories, has it done as a loss, and by a bit of a margin. The margin is widening all the time.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. But and we shouldn't overlook the fact that the Green Party has made some small advances in that seat as well, in terms of the council election results last year. And now I think, forms part of the joint administration. It's
interesting, actually. Some research has shown that it's the Greens and the Liberal Democrats are actually most likely to vote tactically. Now, if they vote tactically, they would be backing the Labour candidate there, because the Labour candidate is the one who's most likely to win. We'll move on to Medway. Rob, you can give us a rundown of... there's 3 seats in Medway: Rochester and Stroud, Gillingham and Rainham, and Cheltenham and Aylesford. Which one should we have a little look at?
Well, I think all 3 of them are fairly interesting. I mean, Rochester and Stroud and Gillingham and Rainham are definitely Labour target seats. I think part of the reason why Keir Starmer's election launch was in Gillingham and Rainham is for that reason. It's one of these target seats. Both of those are predicted to swing to Labour by, pretty significant margins. I think 75% for Gillingham and Rainham, and I want to say somewhere in the 60s for Rochester and Stroud. Chatham and Aylesford is much closer. It still does predict a Labour win. This is Tracy Crouch's former seat. The Conservative Association in Chatham and Aylesford haven't yet selected their candidate, so we don't know who they're going to pick.
Do you think if Tracy Crouch stood in that seat, she'd win?
I think she has a lot of personal popularity locally. It's entirely a question of the national picture, whether it would wash out. I think it would be more a case of disaffected Tory voters staying home rather than Tory voters switching away. Okay. So I think it's possible she could have held it, but again, we don't know who's going to replace her, which charismatic Chatham and Aylesfordian will step in instead. But yeah, it's still predicted to be a Labour win.
Okay, what about Gillingham and Rainham?
Well, in Gillingham and Rainham, the candidate there for Labour is Nashaba Khan, and she's predicted to win sort of in the low 70% chance of winning. She's taking on Raymond Chishti, who's been in the seat since 2010. He's always had fairly solid majorities, but this time around, it's looking like she's going to totally sweep him away.
She's got a bit of history. She did stand in the Rochester and Stroud by-election in 2014. That's right, 2014. So she's been around for a while, so she's been on the scene, and she's a local councillor as well.
Yes, that's right. She's a portfolio holder for housing, I believe.
And so very local candidate.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what about Rochester and Stroud? That's Kelly Tolhurst presently.
Kelly Tolhurst, the Tory MP, holds it at the moment. Yeah, Lauren Edwards is the Labour candidate looking to take her on. Now, again, this is, I would say, if I had to rank the 3 seats, I'd say Rochester and Stroud is in the middle. It could kind of go either way. It's still probably likely. I think Kelly Tolhurst is a bit of a Marmite character. Some people really like her. She's very vocal in the Save Chatham Docks campaign, which is very big locally, but other people sort of, she's just another Tory sort of thing. So that'll be really interesting whether Lauren Edwards can take that one as well. She is predicted to, again, sort of mid-60s, I think, percent chance of taking that seat.
Right, Dan, you've been looking at Sevenoaks and Tunbridge Wells.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in these in the predictions for these 2 seats in the west of the county. Under the latest electoral calculus polling, which is admittedly a few weeks old at this point, but under that polling, they reckon that Sevenoaks will go Labour, which surprised me when I read it, and I think it probably surprised.
It seems almost unreal.
It's one of the most conventionally sort of upper middle class, wealthy commuter belt constituencies you could imagine, right next to the outer fringes of Bromley, which is the only Conservative borough in London. The seat has been Conservative ever since it was created, but they reckon there's quite a good electoral calculus. Reckon there's quite a good chance of Labour sweeping out the current Tory MP Laura Trott, who's also Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and Labour taking it. Now, I'd be very surprised if that happens. If that does happen, I think that would show that Labour are on course for an absolutely thumping majority. That would be very surprising. But the other sort of West Kent seat, which is very interesting to me, is Tunbridge Wells, because electoral calculus say Labour are going to take that one with quite a solid chance of it. However, at the last general election, the Liberal Democrats were in fact second in that constituency, not Labour. And I was at the recent local election campaign in Tunbridge Wells, and the Lib Dems cleaned up there, took a majority of the council, and they've been out there with their parliamentary candidate and friend of the podcast, Mike Martin, pounding pavement like nothing else and treating it like a warm-up for the general election campaign.
But this has happened in other, where you've got Liberal Democrat councils in Conservative seats, and the Conservatives still win.
It's possible. Maybe people will come. Maybe Lib Dem voters will come out and vote tactically for Labour. The Labour candidate in Tunbridge Wells is actually the leader of the group on the council, Hugo Pound. Tunbridge Wells has quite an active political culture as far as it goes, and the Liberal Democrat Party there is very strong. And I've seen them sort of campaigning and telling people pretty openly, the Lib Dems can win here. And since the polls may say Labour will clear that one, but like I say, in 2019, the Lib Dems are in second place there, so that will definitely be one to watch. And given the Lib Dems predictions nationally, they're pretty hopeful for it.
Yeah. Well, I've been keeping an eye on Maidstone and Malling, which is one of these ones. It's a boundary seat change where it's moved from Maidstone on the Weald to Maidstone and Malling. So the incumbent Helen Grant has gone from having some very sort of safe, reliable villages in sort of rural areas to inheriting parts of Malling, some of which are heavy sort of Liberal Democrat areas and some of which are quite Tory. But it's a slightly different prospect to the one that she would have otherwise enjoyed. I mean, she's got a majority of 20,000 plus. The Lib Dems, although it's a tier 3 target on their list, it's actually in reality more like a tier 2 target with the kind of resources that they've got to play with.
And electoral calculus say that will go Labour on their last election. You think that will happen?
Personally, it's more likely that unless the left of centre vote coalesces behind the Liberal Democrat who are fighting it hard, it's more likely that Helen Grant might win, and narrowly with Labour in second place. That's the way if in the normal run of things, but we don't know how this election is going to pan out. I mean, Helen Grant could get absolutely trounced. So we'll have to see. We'll wait and see. But it's definitely one of the ones to watch. Like like Tunbridge Wells, the Liberal Democrats are really targeting that one, and there's really the only 2 targets they have in Kent. And of course, we've got 3 departing MPs, some of them who've been around for quite a long time. So we've got Gordon Henderson, Tracy Crouch, and Natalie Elphick. So they'll all be moving on to pastures new to do new things. Look, thank you very much indeed, chaps, for all that, and we'll have a quick catch up at the end.
Is there a topic that you would like to be discussed on the Kent Politics podcast? Perhaps you've got a question for one of our panel, or you'd like to comment on a hot topic in local or national government. Get in touch by emailing or sending a voice note to kentpoliticspodcast@thekmgroup.co.uk.
Joining us is our special guest today, Dr Lauren Sullivan, leader of the Labour group at Kent County Council, and maybe, just maybe, the next Labour MP for Gravesham. Hello, Lauren.
Hello, Simon. How are you doing?
Not so bad. How are you?
Oh, excited.
Yeah. OK, the general election has just been called. What's your reaction?
Well, it's about time. Ready to get going, we've been out speaking with thousands of people across Gravesham, and I'm just really excited to really put our manifesto to the people and hope that they want to choose us.
What do you think will be the big issues in Kent, and particularly in Gravesham?
So what I've been hearing on the doorstep, and I've spoken to thousands of people, it's about cost of living crisis. It's about a sense of hope, which is lacking at the moment, a sense of where is our country going, that direction. We know that our NHS is on its knees. I've spoken to many people that either haven't been able to get their GP appointment, dentist appointment, and are just feeling really let down by our public services who are trying their best. What we need is a restart, a refresh. It needs change, it needs economic stability, it needs a refresh of the NHS, it needs all of these various different things to really get our country renewed and going again.
If you're going to win, how much do you think you're going to win by? Do you what sort of a majority do you think the Labour Party could get?
At the moment, I'm focusing on winning Gravesham. And Gravesham really is my heart and soul at the moment. I live there, my family's there, I learned to teach there. It is my home. And I really want to see Gravesham's voice represented strongly in House of Parliament, in House of Commons. I'm just really, really excited and hopeful that being the first woman MP of that area, I'd really be able to help champion the voices of those that haven't been listened to.
Can you just tell us how you came into politics and ended up as the Labour opposition leader at Kent County Council?
Sure. So I came in through a bit of an unusual route. So I studied biochemistry at uni. I was the first in my family to go to university. And I thought, how can I make a big difference? Well, biochemistry and public health, that's really exciting and really has that potential to make an impact. I made a diagnostic test for African sleeping sickness, which is now being used out in sub-Saharan Africa to diagnose people. And I wanted to give back. So I studied to be a teacher. And I was taught in the classroom for nearly 4 or 5 years. I had fantastic experience, with youngsters. But then I wanted to stand to represent the community that I lived in. And that's where I stood to be a councillor, both at Gravesham and at Kent County Council, to really take those experiences to help shape policy so that we could help other young people come up and through and really unlock potential, which I know that we've got bags of in this country.
Who were your inspirations?
God, going back, John Snow, who discovered cholera. And the pump, which then saved loads of lives. So really interesting, right? So scientist was able to track down and actually save loads of lives there and make that link between cholera and then people dying and all that sort of stuff. So, and then you're looking back at that time where you've got the Clean Air. I mean, this is going off on a right tangent. I'm really sorry about that. But like the Clean Air Act, all of these different things that happened in the Industrial Revolution that really helped population.
And what sort of political figures did you admire?
Oh, I mean, you can, and there's so many to choose from. Harriet Harman. Mm-hmm. Absolute trailblazer.
Yeah.
It's just anybody that really puts themselves out there. Mm-hmm. When you stand for election, you are putting your whole self out there and you will upset people by just being there. I think if you look at Stella Creasy, I think she's a character who has really pushed women's agenda, that sort of thing. But also if you look at allies and if you look at people like Hilary Benn, what a fantastic human being. That is just calm, considerate, kind. Liz Twist, another just very endearing person. That is exactly the type of people that we need in politics.
Well, we know your day job is teaching. You're a scientist. What makes politics more alluring than a normal life?
God, every day is different. Every day is different. It's similar to teaching. You have to be creative. You have to really find solutions in a framework that is not designed at best. Take, for instance, fly tipping. Random example. As a local council, you get to be an expert in all sorts of random bits of legislation. I mean, fly tipping, the fine has only just recently been raised to £1,000 if you get caught. Given that it can cost £250,000 to clear fly tipping, and that's the public purse paying for that, that's not acceptable. That's not right. It's things like that which are making a terrible blight in our communities. If you take education as an example, where they stripped out and took away coursework and it's just exam focused, that's really not enabling all of our young people to do well and show their best selves.
Under the current polls, you look set to take the Gravesham seat from the incumbent Adam Holloway. And you rate your chances, realistically? I'm
optimistic. I think speaking to thousands of people on the doorstep nearly every week for the past
You have worked it hard, so you've been pounding the streets for quite a long time from what I can gather.
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, as a councillor, that's good practice anyway, to be listening, because making sure that what we're looking to do makes sense, and we are genuinely listening, and we really want to see those new policies come in place. I think Gravesham has been left in some places. I mean, the Tilbury Ferry, the cutting of the Tilbury Ferry it's the only boat that the Conservatives have stopped, has had a devastating impact on our high street. And the local business is telling me there that it's a problem. So it's things like this that we really need to raise the profile of, so that this local infrastructure, the Tilbury Ferry, Gravesham Crossing can come back.
I wanted to ask you something parliamentary while we're on the related topic. It's about, obviously it was big news a couple of weeks ago that Tory MP for Dover, Natalie Elphicke, has defected to the Labour Party. Do you actually believe that she's, suddenly found herself in line with Labour's values on the centre-left? Because it seems a lot of other people in the Labour Party don't believe that, and the Tory MP certainly don't believe that. So what did you make of it?
So I think that having Natalie cross the floor was an incredibly big decision for her. I think it shows to the rest of the country that she has no faith that the policies that the Conservative government are putting forward in them trying to stop the boats is not working. And actually, Keir Starmer's approach of creating a border security command and a new border security command and tackling the criminal gangs and using all the legislative powers that we have to really focus in there is actually a policy that she stands by.
So, I mean, immigration issue aside, obviously, that's what she's outed as her main reason for defection. But do you actually believe she should have a place in the Labour Party? On pretty much any metric, she's considerably to the right even of the average Tory MP. She's put with Liz Truss to be the leader of the party. Most people in the Tory party seem to have thought of her as very firmly on the right of the party, and now an allegedly progressive Labour Party has accepted her with open arms simply because she disagrees with the government on border policies. Does that not make you a bit uncomfortable?
We welcome Natalie. We are a broad church. We know that she's not standing again at the next general election. So we know that there are personal reasons and policy reasons why she's looked to cross the floor. She's welcome there.
Next year there's Kent County Council elections, and it looks reasonably possible that the Labour Party could take control of Kent County Council. What do you rate Labour's chances at KCC in the next election?
So the next Kent County Council elections are going to be very interesting. I think the Conservatives have left the county council in not a great shape. There are many cuts that need to be made, and they are pushing them back to after the next county council election. So whoever inherits, and I think Labour has got a good chance. I think we've got some fantastic councillors and fantastic local Labour Party groups that are really coming together. It's going to be a hard challenge for anybody, but I think we've got a good shout, and I think we've got some excellent candidates coming through.
And so like you say, obviously, local government everywhere is in a bit of a mess financially, especially in Kent. The Labour Party nationally, at least, while it says wants to support local government, is also speaking the language for the tight-fisted fiscal discipline. But Kent County Council is in a lot of trouble. What would a Labour-run Kent County Council be doing, in 18 months' time to plug its holes if central government, run quite likely by the Labour Party, isn't going to give it the money to sort itself out?
So for the past 3 years, the Labour group have put together an alternative budget. And so we meet with officers throughout the year to put forward policy changes. And actually what we found last year was we could keep the Kent Travel Saver at the same price and look to remove it completely the following year. We kept the youth service open. We kept the children's centres open and freely accessible. There were many things that we could keep going, but we chose to cut from elsewhere. So where then did you cut? So we would have cut from our consultants' budget. We would have cut from, hugely inflated senior management budget. We would have really looked at commissioning as an ideology, where at the moment it's commission first, which is just spin it out to businesses to make profits. Haven't got a problem with that per se, but we've got to be getting value for money. And if we can run that service more effectively in-house, then that needs to be a clear choice.
If you end up elected as the MP for Gravesham in the general election, will you stand down from Kent County Council?
That would be most likely, probably at the next.
You'd be a bit too busy, I imagine. I guess the last thing I'd ask is on quite a specific policy issue which is relevant all across Kent and in Gravesham. Labour nationally have been making a big deal out of housing and planning reform and house building and the housing crisis in this country. Gravesham, being relatively close to London as far as Kent areas go, is quite urbanised, but still has to hit housing targets. Under the next Labour government, would you be happy to see places like Gravesham and Dartford in North Kent become even more urbanised to hit housing targets? Because I know it incenses a lot of people, not least of all Labour activists on the ground, that a lot of houses need to be built.
I think what we need to look at for housing is about tenure. So at the minute, it's affordable housing that we're in such short supply. Council housing as well. The council can only borrow so much from their very small budgets to build more council housing. That's what I want to see expansion of council, social, affordable housing. But it needs to be with community support and backing.
Because one of the great criticisms that we hear all the time is that you build tens, if not hundreds of thousands of houses in Kent over time, but nobody local can afford to buy them. So perhaps it's the wrong kind of housing. Would you agree with that? But how would a Labour government achieve that? Because at the end of the day, you've still got market forces at work, and there is a need for housing, or so we're told. What sort of houses should we be building, and in what sort of numbers to really kind of address the need?
So the people that I speak to and people that have lost their houses through the Liz Truss budget last year, that have had to move because the mortgage rates went up so much, the people that have children still living at them at home that have gone to uni, that come back, cannot get on the housing ladder, all of those, all they're telling me is we need homes that are affordable, and they are affordable for local people. So the average salary in Gravesham is, I think it's 32,000. We need to make sure that even as a single person, you would be able to afford to live in Gravesham. And it's about having a mix, a diverse mix, but having enough affordable social. I want more council housing so that people have got that security and stability in their own lives so that they could then achieve their potential. People shouldn't be living in fear about Section 21 dropping on their mats and you've got to go find somewhere else. We need that security. They need that security so that they can build their lives.
Okay, Dr Lauren Sullivan, thank you very much indeed for your time today and wish you all the very best for the future.
Oh, thank you, Simon. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Paul, before we go, 18 seats in Kent, how many do you think will fall?
I think 9 will go to Labour and 9 will go to the Conservatives.
Okay, and what's your national prediction then?
I'd say a more modest margin of victory for Labour, probably around about 60 or 70 seats.
Okay. Dan, 18 seats in Kent, how many do you think will go?
I think
how do you think will go?
At least 10 will go to Labour, and I think nationally Labour will get a majority for sure, anywhere between 10 to 100.
Okay. 10 to 100?
Yeah.
Well, that's a quite broad sweep, isn't it?
I mean, they'll definitely win, don't know how much by.
Okay, and finally, Rob.
I'd say 7 to Labour in Kent, 2 to Lib Dems, the rest to Tory, and then nationally I'd say around in the 80s, a majority.
Yeah, so big, you think big win. Okay, that wraps up what's been a whirlwind week for politics in Kent. Thanks to Rob, Dan, Paul and Dr Lauren Sullivan, and we'll have another packed pod next week. You can follow us on X, formerly Twitter, just search for Kent Politics Podcast. Also, don't forget to tune in to KMTV at 5 p.m. each Friday for their politics show. All the best now.
Thanks for listening to the Kent Politics Podcast. Don't forget to check out stories throughout the week on the politics page of Kent Online. And you can watch the Kent Politics Show with Rob Bailey on KMTV every Friday at 5 p.m. or on demand at kmtv.co.uk.
This has been an I Am Listening original podcast. For more information, head over to our website, im-listening.co.uk.